right. All right. All right. All right. We're back. I'm so excited to have you all back here in Creative Your Ever. Let's see here. People outside honking their horns. They're excited too. That's all right. All right, let's find Kelsey. I'm really super excited to have Kelsey Hoff join us today talking about journaling and blogging and how they can work together and work against each other, I guess. But let me get Kelsey up here. Hi, Kelsey. Oh, I think you're on mute. Sorry, I muted everyone.
You gotta start it off that way, huh?
Yeah, right. It's funny, we play bingo, we play virtual work from home bingo, and one of the things was you're on mute, or sorry, I was on mute, right? So
the phrase that pays.
Kelsey, hey, thank you so much for speaking today at Creative Your Ever. I'm really excited to listen to your presentation because it combines two things that I like, creating content and blogging. So with that being said, Kelsey is a freelance writer here in Chicago and does all kinds of creative stuff and creative work. So let's give it around for Kelsey. And Kelsey, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today and taking your first weekend of the year to be here with us. It's been great so far. I've listened in on several of the other presentations, and I was so happy to hear so many people talking about journaling already as a part of something they already do or something they want to do. I heard somebody say that it's hard to stick to, and I've certainly been there as well, and I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. But I'm hoping that the process I'm going to talk to you about today can help you write a little more consistently and discover more interesting things to write about. So with that being said, yes, please use the chat. I'm going to have some questions that I kick it off with, and I definitely want to hear your answers to those. So I have my screen ready here. There we go. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yep.
Cool. So I came up with a process called Journal to Blog, which let's start a different way. So we're here today to talk about writing, which is something that a lot of people have complicated feelings about, and that's perfectly fine. And there's really good reasons why that happens. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I got my bachelor's in English, and I also have a master's in poetry. And I've done all kinds of different writing, from journalism to, blogging and poetry, academic writing. So I kind of live and breathe it. And I've taught it, I've tutored it. And one thing I can tell you is that you were probably taught to write the wrong way. Most of us were, and that's because they teach us how to write essays that are easy to grade. And, in the real world, there's really, those same principles don't always apply. So for most people, that's enough to turn them off of writing forever. And that makes me really sad. And it ultimately takes a little bit of unlearning to find your voice and find a process that works for you. And that's kind of what this process is about. So my first question that I have for everyone is, what kinds of content do you want to be working on this year? So that can be, the format or the different topics or the different purposes. What are some of your content related goals that you're working on this year?
I can start. Yep. I want to keep my blog going, and I want to write a bunch of scripts for videos or podcasts.
All right. Very good.
Excuse me. I'm intend to launch a new app sometime within the next, I guess, 3 to 5 months. I'd like to develop some content around that and to create some user interest.
Okay, cool. Anyone else?
Tina here. I would like to get my blog going for a travel blog.
Nice. And next question to follow that up is, regardless of what you feel like you're supposed to do for those things, what are some things that is going to make that content good? And what are some things that will help you consider whether that is a success? Like if I could do this with my blog, then I'll know I felt really successful about it.
You know, I think there's a lot of emphasis right now in creating original content. I don't think there's a lot new that a lot of us have to say that hasn't already been said by somebody else. And because there's so many people right now online, there's so much content. I guess, you know, my question is, how do I create something that's relevant and engaging that will bring people to see my particular product, download it, and use it?
That's a great point. And I'm glad you asked that, because originality is what this journaling process is all about. Everybody, you're right in that there are only like a handful of topics in whatever you know, field you're in that are, you know, that people are going to talk about. And the special thing is that nobody's going to talk about them the same way. Nobody else has the same experience as you do. And you can put your own spin on each of those topics to make it really interesting. So with that being said, we've got originality as something that we're working towards, and also expertise.
Well,
you know,
I guess the other thing that I'd like to say is that I'm still in the pre-launch stage, but this is what I'm guessing, maybe you can help with this, is that once we actually have a product, when some people are actually using it and there's some experience, there's going to be more to talk about than there is right now.
Yeah, I think you'll discover those things as you go. And, you know, there's a lot of different forms of feedback from your customer base that you'll be able to use that'll show you what they're really interested in, how they're using your app, and what they're interested in reading about it.
Hey,
So,
Kelsey,
yeah.
we actually have lots of feedback in the questions here. So
I don't see them.
yeah, you're sharing, and that's why I'll read them too, if that's cool
Sure.
with you. Kristen Ramos said, I need to work on my social media presence. And then Robert says, content for both school website and my professional photo site. And he'd like to do a podcast as well.
Cool.
Kristen chimed in again saying relatability and then responses and engagement from others with her content. I'm adding.
Yeah.
And a lot more. I know Lori chiming in saying behind the scenes history content is the type of content she's creating for her startup nonprofit. And I know I had a conversation with someone else just recently. Maybe she's too shy to say it, but how to find their voice. They're looking for how to find their voice. Yeah.
Awesome. Those are all great things, and I hope that we can touch on all of those.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just going to add,
yeah.
I was also looking for when you get comments and engagement on blog posts, like that would be kind of a something of success that I'd be looking for, you know, to try and create.
Yeah. So, you know, people are, you know, having feelings about it and, you know, engaged enough to want to, you know,
write comment.
Yeah. Okay. So all of that being said, why journaling? Why take it all the way back to, you know, this very disorganized type of system that like everybody does it their own way. It's not, you know, not very goal oriented all the time. It's not, you know, there's no rules. There's no rules to journaling traditionally. So why go to that space when we're looking at creating something really specific? And so I have another question to follow that up, which is, how long does your idea generation step in your content creation process take? There's really no way to quantify that, right? Like you can't sit down and say, I'm going to have a, you know, figure out my topic in 20 minutes. You can't say like, I'm going to, you know, I'm gonna sit down and figure out my topic and start typing. That's not how creativity works. You all know that. We're a bunch of creatives on here. You can't just sit down and get a good idea on command. So what this process does is it kind of takes that or that idea generation step and gives it its own space. Instead of saying, I'm going to sit down and, you know, I'm going to crank out a list of topics and, you know, follow those. You're not always going to feel ready to talk about all those things if you do it that way. And this ensures that you're getting that content from and those stories and those points from your real experiences, instead of doing it the other way and saying, I have this topic, what am I going to say about it? So yeah, we're going to solve a few problems here. So one that I like to talk about is what I call writing baggage, which is kind of what I said about we all learn to write the wrong way. So we have all these you know, things in our head that we're thinking about, when really what we need to be focusing on is what we're going to say and not how we're going to say it yet. Some people have the issue that they're not sure what's going to resonate with their audience or what their audience wants to hear. We have analysis paralysis and all the supposed to's, and sometimes there's too much to say and we don't know where to start. And last, shooting for perfection on the first try is going to shut down progress every time in a creative endeavor. So hopefully journaling is going to solve those problems for you. And I did, when I was putting this slideshow together, I did a little bit of research on how creativity works. And I'm sure some of you probably recognize some of these things. They all have something in common, which is you have to sift through a lot of information before you can find the valuable nuggets that people are going to want to hear about. So we already talked about the fact that creativity is not linear, you can't predict it, and you need some room for failure. But investment theory says creativity is a decision to buy low and sell high. So when you're buying, that's your you know, idea generation. You have to think about a lot of little ideas, and they're mostly going to be failures. But when you find those few that are going to be really valuable for your situation, you you know, put all your effort into selling those with a good production value and your actual content creation, because those are two separate processes. And then Little Bets is very similar, which it says that you make a bunch of little risks, and each one you learn a little bit, and you get built up more and more each time, and it leads to bigger aha moments. And then my favorite one is Composting Theory from Natalie Goldberg's book, Writing Down the Bones. And that one says that we everything that we see and hear and experience kind of breaks down in our subconscious like compost, and our ideas are what comes out of that. So it's kind of very much like how our dreams manifest from our subconscious, and it's saying that ideas work the same way. So as a writer, I really enjoy that idea. So right now we're going to kind of move into a workshop portion. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen, or a document of some sort, however you like to take notes, we can take some time to set some intentions for your journaling process. So all of the great stuff you talked about, blogging and podcasts and your app, those are great, but we're taking it back to the journaling step, which comes just before that. So as you think about a less regimented, less, you know, this is not a SMART goal, this is not, this is more about exploration and exploring what's already in your brain to kind of dig your content well. I know I've heard other people use that term. So for your journaling practice, some good questions to ask yourself are, what do you want to be known for? What does your audience want and need to know? What stories do you want to tell? What is it all for, or what do you want to accomplish? And what kinds of ideas do you want to begin your process with? So we're kind of letting go of the idea that we're looking for something specific, because sometimes the best ideas surprise you. And we want to be a little more open so we can find some really, innovative and interesting ideas based on things we already know. So the next,
Hey, Kelsey?
Yes.
Kelsey, would you mind, we have a question. Can you repeat the intentions you just
Yeah. So those questions were, what do you want to be known for? What does your audience want and need to know? What stories do you want to tell? What is it all for, or what do you want to accomplish? And what kinds of ideas do you want to begin your content creation process with? All right, so I'm going to move into the kind of habit forming part of journaling, which I know we've had other people talk about productivity and getting into good habits for creativity. And these are some of my suggestions, and kind of a workshop for figuring out when and how you want to do your writing and when you can make it happen. So what works best for you. Think about what times of day you feel most creative, what times of day your mind is clearest, or when you want to dedicate time to writing. So for me, I like to write, and this is slightly a different mindset than the kind of writing where I'm going to finish, like create a draft or finished product. So I like to journal in the evenings, because I need a super clear mind in the morning to be able to think really super clearly and be able to edit and organize and come up, and stick to the brand voice that I'm working with, and be in that mindset. But when I'm in my like loosey-goosey creative mindset for journaling, I don't really need to be as focused, and it's more about recording ideas and being open-minded about it. So first question on here is, when can you make a soft commitment to journaling? And I say that because you're not going to want to punish yourself for not doing it, because then it's not fun anymore, and it's not how creativity works. So some days you're just not going to be in the right mood for it, and some days you are. So this isn't, like I said, it's not a SMART goal. It's not something like that you can regiment. So one of my favorite tricks is to associate it with something else. So if you say, when I sit down to have my morning coffee, I'm going to write some things down, or I'm going to journal to transition out of my workday, or while I'm in the car waiting to pick up my kids, or while I'm on the train, associate it with another habit you already have that you're going to do every day, so that you can use that as a mental note and get into that like feeling and associate that with creativity. The next step is to create some reminders that you're actually going to see. So whether that is, leaving your journal in the car, or making a Post-it, making some tasks in your to-do app, or time blocking on your calendar, setting a reminder on your phone, making sure you're actually going to have to push the button to dismiss that and say, like, either, yes, I did it, or I have to dismiss this note for today and I didn't do it. So kind of keeps you accountable. One way, if you're not sure, if you've never really done anything like this before, a good trick is to write down the date and time whenever you do find yourself writing, so that you can go back later and sort of skim over those and see when when you actually did find time to sit down and write, and you might notice like, oh, it always is in the morning, or it's always, you know, this day of the week or something. So you look for trends. And then last, I say this a lot, don't punish yourself for not journaling, because it's just antithetical to the whole process. So yeah, so those, you can kind of think through those and start getting into that habit. This next piece is the real cornerstone of the Journal to Blog program that I came up with. So essentially what you do is you create a mind map of the different subject areas that you want to touch on, that you consider yourself an expert in, things you have real life experience with, parts of your identity, anything, any kind of like subject area that you want to touch on in your blog over and over again, or your podcast, or whatever type of media that is. So I like to start by, you just put my experience in the middle in a bubble, and then create other bubbles that branch off of that for each thing. So this is, there's a free software online called MindMup that that you can use. There's another one too, I forget the name of it, but there are a few different, if you just type in mind mapping software free, you should be able to find a few different ones. But you know, pen and paper works just fine. So this could be a great thing to do on the inside of your journal cover, so that you always have it right in front of you. And this is something that like can grow and change, and as you discover different things, or you know, remember different things, you can always add and change this as often as you want. So this is kind of so that you're never starting with a totally blank page. And we also have different ways that we can cross-section this and sort of use it to be able to ask yourself really good questions, like you're interviewing yourself almost, to create custom writing prompts, which is really super fun. So yeah, this is basically your tool for finding those great ideas that you didn't really know you had. And it solves that problem of like not recognizing a good idea when you have it, and not knowing which of your stories are, you know, interesting, or, you know, worth talking about. Because that's something that I hear a lot from people, is like, yeah, I know this and I know that, but I don't know if anybody wants to hear about that. And I think this kind of gets it outside of you, and it makes it that hunting process a little more fun. And it's almost like I said, interviewing yourself. So it almost makes it like you're talking to another person, and externalizing it just a little bit, so that you know, it's not just in your head. And I think that makes a big difference. So yeah, here's a bigger one. This is just an example I put together with things that I might put in my inventory of expertise. So you might notice that I have blogging branching off of the writing node, but then it also has an arrow that goes over to marketing, because it's a type of marketing. And also empathy is part of my purpose, but it also branches off into storytelling, because it's it also is very heavily related to that. So this is something that you might spend a lot of time on, or something you might just start and then fix up a little bit as you go. It's really up to you. So, and ultimately, like, this looks weird, it looks complicated. It's not something that you have to use every single time. It's kind of for those times when you want to, you know, go prospecting for ideas in, you know, another area where you might not necessarily, you know, think to look. it might be for those days when you don't have an idea, but you have time to journal and you want to, you just want to keep digging your content well. So like you can let your intuition guide you a little bit. This isn't like a systematic thing where it's supposed to be like, you know, I have to write about this and then I'm going to write about this. And like, whether I feel like it or not, it's you let your intuition guide you a little bit. So yeah, I think that covers it pretty well. Any questions about that? I definitely want to leave some time at the end too.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking at. I think what I'm looking at is you're saying your expertise is storytelling, marketing, purpose, and writing. Is that right? And then each of those branches off of each of those expertise are certain things that you like to write about or talk
Yeah,
or think about?
I would say so. Yeah, they're like major topics that I want to make sure are present on my blog, and then also subtopics that kind of make those things up. So
Thank you.
This is like your content inventory, right? This is the
Yeah.
things that you typically want to write about, and it, like you said. And then a question I have for you, Kelsey,
mhm.
is do you draft your blog content in your journal, or do you just use your journal purely as a writing activity?
I don't draft content in my journal. I see those as two very different processes that the journal basically is getting me to the point of defining the topics that are going to be in my blog. And when I'm going to talk about that process a couple slides from now.
Okay.
And,
I'm sorry. I thought you were wrapping up. No, keep going. Keep going.
No.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, it's sort of like the difference between listening and speaking. Like when I'm in a journal, when I'm journaling, that's almost like listening to myself and listening and telling myself a story. And then once I've discovered a concept that I think is interesting and complex enough to write a blog about, then I outline it in a Word doc or Google Doc or whatever. And that's when the content creation process starts. And the beauty of it is then I already have some of those points. I already have the story. I already have like some of the content, and it's a matter of turning it into that blog format.
I love that. I love that concept. That's tweetable. Journaling is like listening. Blogging is like speaking,
Yeah.
for sure.
So next question. So what goes in the journal? Like we have this crazy like web of ideas. What actually goes in the journal? So I have some methods of looking at that to, like I said, to create writing prompts. Like I like to think about time and like for each of those nodes, how did I feel about this 10 years ago, 5 years ago, yesterday, last week? What are some things that I remember happening? What are some goals that I've achieved, or you know, things that I've struggled with when it comes to each one? And also, you know, what's happening right now in each of these things. And those are things that we talk about at, I'm going to be starting up some workshops that I'll tell you about a little bit later. And we go through those different ways to generate writing prompts. So another thing you can do in your journal is to sort of review or debrief important events and conversations as they happen. You can note feedback from your clients and questions that they ask you, comments that they leave on social media, and those other things that are really good indicators of what you can be touching on in your content. You can write down your opinions and comments on trends and hot topics and things as you notice them. You can definitely make lists and set goals in your journal. It doesn't always have to be a really deep level of detail. It can be quick notes. It can be, you know, it can be a stream of consciousness, like super detailed thing if you want. And last, you can reflect on past events and jot down things you're working on in your business and track your progress. So those are all useful things to do. Yeah. So next, this next slide is kind of what Scott was asking about and what I like to call harvesting your content. There's probably a better way to put that metaphor with, you know, our content well. There's, you know, this is maybe our bucket for the content well. If you have like, I know if you've worked with like a branding specialist and if you have, you know, your business goals and, you know, your audience that you're speaking to and things like that, those are all good guidelines for things that you want to be looking for in your journal. So, you know, what's on brand for you, what's going to support some, you know, upcoming events that you have, or, you know, be useful in terms of the different offerings you have as an entrepreneur. Or, you know, I know some people, if you're writing a blog just for the sake of telling your story and thought leadership, maybe you have some specific things you want to accomplish and, you know, causes you want to support, or awareness for different types of things. So kind of knowing those end goals can help you go through your journal. And so I really advocate for using a pen and paper journal. It's how I like to do it, and it makes this part of the process a little easier. So you just literally grab a highlighter and go through. You have these specific things you're looking for, or reading it and just making sure that you highlight what really what sounds interesting to you, because when you're writing it down, you're very close to it, and it's things that you're still working through. And again, this is the difference between you know, speaking and listening mode again. Like you're kind of listening to yourself and listening to these ideas as if you're hearing them from someone else. And you may think like, what was I thinking, you know, what was I on about that day? Or it might be like, oh yeah, that was a really good idea. So you kind of go through and highlight different things that like, oh, I was able to write a lot about this. I have a lot to say about this, or this is interesting, and just kind of go through and find things that you've had a lot to say about. And then the content creation process becomes about repositioning those things for your audience and thinking like, what questions do they have? How familiar are they with this? How do I present this for them in a way that's going to be really useful? So it goes from like why this is important to me to why this should be important to you. And then you find your rhythm. So like I said, I like to journal in the evenings, and maybe once a month I'll go through my journal and read through the last month and highlight, and then fill those things into a content calendar that and then when I am ready to sit down and write the blog, I don't have to sit there and scratch my head. So yeah, I think any questions on that like harvesting process?
Do you set a specific date, or do you just kind of go when you're ready, or do you have like a calendar appointment in your calendar for harvesting from your journal?
Yeah. I haven't been that, you know, disciplined about it, but I think one of my goals for this year is going to definitely be to make that a more regular thing. And one thing I'm wondering, I'm going to expand my view of all y'all so I can see you raise your hands or whatnot. How many people actually go back and read their journals?
So that's a problem I have, is I don't find myself going back that often. You know, it's like I write, and when I'm on it, when I do write one, I write, or I do my bullet journaling, but I don't really ever go back and read them. That's why I don't like using my journal as a tool to capture ideas, because I don't ever look back at it, if that makes sense. So I guess if you have any other thoughts on harvesting or reading, going back, that's awesome too, you know? So I guess it's being more intentional about it is probably most important, you know, to that.
Yeah. One thing you might want to do is keep separate journals. I am a crazy person and I have like 5 separate journals for different things. I have one for my creative writing and poetry. I have one for taking notes and day-to-day things for my business. And then also one that I use for like, you know, reflecting and debriefing business-wise. And I have one that I use for like essay ideas. And I have one that I just write about movies that I watch. And it's nuts. And because then if I want to like take my journal with me, it's like, well, which one do I take with me? Which is always a problem. But one thing you might want to do is if you decide to use the journal for content creation, like say, okay, this is the one that I'm going to hold on to and go back and read later. And I know that there's some feelings attached to that because I kept a journal all the way through middle school, and I was like many, I was very tempted to burn it. Which I didn't, and I'm glad that I didn't because I went back and I read those recently and I learned a lot about myself, a lot of stuff. So Stephen, I know I saw you had your hand up for a minute there.
Are you saying that when you go through this process, starting with journalism, journaling and harvesting your content, that by the time you actually sit down to write your blog, you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to say?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If you don't know what you're going to say when you sit down to write your blog post, then you have to go back and do a little bit more journaling, because we always want to come from a place of expertise and knowing exactly what we want to say. Because if you're still trying to figure it out, then we're not ready to create that content yet.
So you're saying you do most of the figuring out before you actually sit down to write the post. So how long does it usually take you to, you know, produce a finished post? So I'm not really counting the journaling as part of that process because that's separate for me. So by the time, the content creation really begins for me with outlining based on things that I've already written about. So I'll create an outline saying like, I'm going to talk about this and this. And then some of it is transcribing from my journal and some of it is like re-summarizing and retelling. Now that I have more direction. So it really cuts down the time that it takes to produce an actual blog because I've thought through these things already a couple of times. So, you know, it might take me just a couple of hours to write a blog post because I already know what I'm going to say. You've already done the work.
Yes. I'm going to hide all of you guys again. My last slide is just some things to remember when you're, you know, building your habit and trying to put this into practice. So like we just said, keeping journaling and content creation separate because it's very much, I have those metaphors again to go back to the creativity, how creativity works. So journaling is like the composting part and content creation is like gardening. So like it's making something look beautiful based on and presentable and, you know, professional based on like this letting yourself be messy with the journaling part of it. So journaling is like taking an inventory and content creation is making the sale. And it's very much like you already know what you're talking about by the time you get to that phase. So yes, keeping those things separate, build your journaling habit and, you know, let it be loosey-goosey, let it be messy and just something you do. It becomes like almost a mindfulness practice. It's you know, it's a great way to de-stress and process things and you know, get stuff out of your own head. I really love encouraging people to journal about their business if they're an entrepreneur. It helps you like worry less and it's just good for you. Doctors say that it's like really good for managing stress. And then, so we kind of let that be whatever it is. And then when it comes to making content out of that, that's when you start to use SMART goals and content calendars and, you know, your productivity tracking things. And that's when we start, it becomes business. Remember not to punish yourself for not journaling. Don't start the content creation part from a blank slate. And then also don't do it alone. Find some accountability partners and people who are doing the same thing with you. So I have a Facebook group that I set up for people who are practicing journal to blog, people who are curious about it. It's called the Journal to Blog Writers Room on Facebook. I can share that in the chat after I get out of presentation mode. So one thing I'm going to start doing again is self-care Sunday journaling write-ins, which I did over the summer. It was really fun. And it's just like an hour where we all show up, we say what we want to accomplish during that time together, and then we turn the microphones off and we write for maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then come back together and say, this is what I got done. Those are free. And yeah, this is, I have a lot of things that are going to be coming up this year. I'm going to start to do some other types of journaling meetups and coaching for using the system. So the Facebook group is going to be the place where you hear news about all that stuff. So I'm hoping to see some of you there. And I think that's all I have to say. I can take more questions if you would like.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah, it's good to go to the speaker view if you were on gallery view, anyone watching. But basically, a couple things. One, journaling is a really powerful process. Thank you for outlining that. And two, creating content is an investment for time. And I think that one thing that you said, and I think I've taken away for sure, is that even if you journal, let's say you are starting a business or doing something like that, and you start journaling about your business, you may not be ready to create content, but you could even look back at it 3 years from now and then have talking points for how to write content 3 years from now that you had about experiences today, right? So even if you don't create content, you should still invest in journaling because you could use it later, right? So just like you could look, like you mentioned, going back into your middle school journal, you could, you know, if you wanted to, you could use that as for content today, right? So, so yeah, good idea. Good idea. Any other questions?
All right.
Yeah.
I guess
cool.
that means that I was thorough. So that's great.
Yeah. Robert says, thanks, Kelsey. He's going to start journaling. Thanks, Robert. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's been a long weekend, right? But there's still a lot more to come. So I do hope you all, especially Kelsey, thank you. I do hope you all can stick around and basically next three final presenters got coming up here are let's see here. Juan and Jorge are talking about servant leadership, which is going to be really great at 3 p.m. Sahara Rose DeVore is at 4 p.m. and she's got a great story on how she turned her passion into her coaching business. I'm sorry, 4 more speakers. Lauren Ramsey is going to talk about social media that doesn't suck. And finally, Stephen Loam, who actually is on the call right now, Steve. Hi, Steve, is going to talk about a practical approach to passion to help me wrap up the event this weekend. I really appreciate all of you who have been with me this weekend. It means a lot to me. And I do hope you're getting a lot of actionable and practical tips out of this. And that being said, we've got about 15 minutes, so I guess we'll take a little break. See you guys at 3 p.m. Central Time.
I saw someone post a question.
Oh, sure.
There's a question for Kelsey in the chat.
Oh, sorry, Brett.
Sorry, guys. 'Cause that was a great send off. Hold on. Hey, how often do you turn a journal post into a blog post? I mean, I just like to know like your frequency. Like, how often per week does a journal entry or your journal entries turn into a blog post? Do you find yourself turning those journal entries in once a week, twice a week, or once a month?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it depends on one, how often you want to do that, how often you think you have enough content to turn into a blog post, and also how much your audience can handle. And I think for a lot of new bloggers, like once a month is perfectly fine. Once a week is a lot of writing and it takes a lot of dedication. So you might want to build up to that. But I've also seen people who want to blog once a week to get their SEO authority built up, and then they slow it down. So I think once a month is really manageable, and it's up to you whether you want to sit down and like come up with a list of topics and do all that harvesting and come up with a few different topics, or if you want to just go back to your journals every time you're ready to write a blog post. It's really up to you.
Okay. Thanks. Great talk. Thank you.
I have a question. Oh,
Sure.
I have a question too. I do some small business consulting through SCORE, and I'm working with a lot of people in early startup. And we talk about, marketing strategy, social media, occasionally blogging comes up. I'm thinking that for people who are just getting started, making a commitment to a blog is a very, very big commitment for all the reasons that you've just mentioned. And the return on investment without an audience, I don't think is very big. What would you say to somebody like that?
Well, I think that one, if you write the blog and you're not sharing it, then it's definitely not going to have a benefit for you. Like, it's only going to help you if it's reaching people. So making sure that you're sharing it out on social media, and that people are finding it. But also, like, I just wrote a post recently about repurposing content too. So getting these ideas together, maybe a blog post that you write, if you're writing a blog post every month, maybe one of those is going to turn into a keynote speech. Maybe one of those is going to turn into, another kind of presentation, or a podcast topic, or something else, or a video. If you ultimately end up deciding to go with another kind of content, blog posts are really friendly to being turned into other things. So it's a good practice if it's something that you feel, and it's a really accessible way to create content too. So if you're just starting out, it's easy to do yourself, even though it takes, like, compared to other types of media, it's easy to do yourself, even though it takes a lot of dedication. So I would say just building up that self-discipline, blogging is really good for that.
Yeah, and I think kind of like we were saying too, Steve, it's a way to build a daily writing habit too, which is probably the most important aspect that a lot of this is getting into the routine of getting into a writing habit, even if it's just for yourself, so.
Cool.
Yeah, great.
All right. Thanks, Scott, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you. See you all in about 10 minutes or so.